Today I will be looking at one of the major companies located in the Duncairn and Dock wards, to which Nigel has listed the casualties of in the Second World War, and that is of the York Street Flax Spinning Company, one of the largest employers in the linen industry in Northern Ireland at that time, during which period the company's premises operated as the largest flax spinning mill in the world. So let's look at exactly where this company's premises stood in 1941. It was located on York Street, extending down Henry Street, along North Queen Street and back down Sussex Street, where several fatalities were recorded during the air raids of 1941, as Nigel has already covered. The mill premises occupied an entire block, showing the size and scale of the operation and employing several thousand employees, and here you see the oldest part of the mill buildings facing onto North Queen Street. An aerial view this time of York Street, taken a decade earlier in 1930, shows the industrialisation of the area. York Street's premises are on the left-hand side of the slide, with Gallagher's tobacco factory in the centre. The flax preparation and spinning processes were carried out on the 4 to 5 floored sections of the company's premises, known as a mill and seen here on the right, whilst the weaving and finishing of the linen product was carried out in the ground floor part known as a weaving factory, just here. Because of the tremendous movement from side to side of the power looms, the process could only be carried out in a single-storied building, and here you can see the sawtooth roof, glass roofs, which were essential for letting in natural light where faults could easily be detected during production. You can also see York Street Presbyterian Church, just here, in this shot, which was located between Gallagher's factory and the York Street Mill. So let's look at the origins of the company and who was responsible for growing the business. What was later to become the York Street Mill started out in 1816 when Thomas Mulholland set up a cotton spinning mill in Winetabbert Street in Belfast, so it was quite humble origins. The building soon outgrew the original premises, and following Thomas's death in 1820, his son, Andrew Mulholland, seen on the right here, relocated to a stretch of open land known as the Point Fields, close to Henry Street in 1822, where his cotton spinning plant soon became the largest of its kind in Ireland, an image of which can be seen in the top left-hand corner of the slide. This new mill was destroyed by fire in the summer of 1828, but by then the firm had realised that the competition of Lancashire and Glasgow, where cotton was imported directly, was steadily growing, and cotton spinning in Ireland was doomed. For Tuesday, the Mulhollands decided to rebuild their mill for the spinning of flax, and this proved to be the best decisions they ever made. With the enormous success of the company and the enormous profits made from the spinning of flax, Andrew Mulholland retired to Ballywalter in County Down, where he commissioned Charles Lanyon, the leading architect of the day, to design Ballywalter Park as his country seat. The house was one of the finest in Ireland when completed in 1852, taking 6 years to build around an original house known as Springfield. Andrew's son John took over the business in 1846 and was the driving force behind the massive expansion of the firm, opening branches in Paris, New York, London and Berlin between 1870 and 1876, making the company a truly international business. He served as MP for Downpatrick in 1874 and was raised to the peerage as the first Baron Dunleith in 1892. He was succeeded thereafter by the second Lord Dunleith, seen here in his peer's robes. He was attending the coronation of Edward VII. The family lived amid the trappings of sumptuous wealth, not bad for 2 generations following Thomas Mulholland, who could only sign for properties he bought in Belfast with an X. Apart from Ballywalter Park, which remains in the hands of the Dunleith family today, one of the finest legacies that the Mulholland family left for the people of Belfast is the Grand Mulholland organ, one of the oldest examples of a functioning classic English pipe organ in the UK. It was installed in the Ulster Hall in 1862 by Andrew Mulholland. Back in York Street, the company of Andrew Mulholland went from strength to strength and was renamed York Street Flax Spinning Company in 1851, becoming a limited liability company in 1864. The company made a fortune following the outbreak of the American Civil War in the 1860s, as imports of raw cotton from the southern states dried up, leaving the spinning of flax soaring ahead of its competitors in Britain. The company used only the latest technological advances, such as the wet spinning process and power loom weaving, which until that time had been in its infancy. You can see some of the machinery employed on the York Street Mill in these slides. The processes of the mill, of course, caused serious health problems amongst its employees, including the loss of hearing due to the incredible noise generated by the machinery, to lung problems caused by the fibres that came off the spinning frames and looms known as puss. By 1940, the company was listed as being flax spinners, power loom, linen and linen thread manufacturers, linen merchants, bleachers, dyers and finishers. So the company by that stage had encompassed every possible facet of linen production. Now we're going to take a look at some of the movers and shakers of the York Street Flax Spinning Company leading up to the Second World War. One of the largest shareholders in the limited company was Robert Henry Stirrat Reid. He was the son of Dr. Thomas Reid, a leading physician in the town of Belfast. R.H. Reid entered the company as an apprentice in 1874, working his way up through the ranks to become managing director and eventually chairman of the board of directors. In the early days with his company, he was sent off to New York, a trip which he made several times, in order to foster the interests of the company in the Americas, showing the international nature of the business of the company on York Street. R.H. Reid resided at Wilmot House at Upper Malone, a house he purchased from the Bristow family, directors of the Northern Bank. Following Reid's death, the house then became the property of Sir Thomas and Lady Edith Dixon, and it was Lady Dixon that presented the house to the people of Belfast in 1963, becoming Sir Thomas and Lady Dixon Park as we know it today. The next important member of the controlling families of the company at the time of the Second World War was Lieutenant Colonel Ogilvy B. Graham, whose father, also O.B. Graham, was a director and shareholder in the company, entering in partnership with John Mulholland. Graham was a first-class cricketer and British Army officer who rose to command a battalion of the Royal Irish Rifles in the First World War, during which he was awarded the DSO, the Distinguished Service Order. During the Second World War, he commanded the Royal Artillery Defences of the TA in Northern Ireland and was appointed an officer of the Order of the British Empire, known as the OBE, of course. He also served as Deputy Lieutenant and High Sheriff of County Down. Ogilvy B. Graham lived at Larchfield Estate at Annahilt, outside Lisburn, which had been purchased by his grandfather in 1868. Another link with the linen industry in Northern Ireland occurred when the estate was sold by the Graham family to Leslie Mackey of the engineering firm of James Mackey and Sons in 1868. Mackeys, of course, were leading manufacturers of the machinery used in the linen mills of Belfast and around the world. Today, Larchfield is one of the leading hospitality venues in the province, under the guidance of Leslie Mackey's son and daughter-in-law. On the evening of Easter Tuesday, 15th of April 1941, and as a result of Belfast being one of the key manufacturing cities in the British Empire, 160 bombers of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, left their bases in northern France to attack the city. The York Street Flax Spinning Company, along with other linen companies such as William Urt and Son and the Brookfield Spinning Company, were involved in the war effort by manufacturing aero linen for covering aircraft such as the Hawker Hurricane, as can be seen in this slide. York Street and the surrounding area suffered incredible damage, and the premises of the York Street Flax Spinning Company were virtually destroyed, one of the greatest commercial losses to manufacturing and employment in the city. The proximity of the York Street business to Victoria Barracks, just across the road on North Queen Street, was another contributing factor in the destruction of the plant. Belfast was ill prepared for the Blitz, with insufficient AA guns, few searchlights, and inadequate air raid shelters, resulting in catastrophic loss of life, particularly in North Belfast. Contemporary reports from the scene describe the walls of the mill falling over like an avalanche into the surrounding streets, the nearest of which was Sussex Street, but many other nearby streets were also affected by the indiscriminate aerial bombing. Wave after wave of German bombers dropped tons of high explosive bombs, parachute mines and incendiaries on the well-nigh defenceless city. The York Street Flax Spinning Company suffered several direct hits and was virtually destroyed as a result, as can be seen in these images from the time. This was the destruction that met the employees of the mill on the morning of Wednesday, 16th of April 1941, the buildings reduced to a crumbling shell. This slide shows the clearance that occurred on the site following the destruction of the company. Amazingly, the tall mill chimney survived the air raids, although the smoke coming out of it at this stage would not have been as a result of power being generated in the engine house, rather the spoils of the cleared site being burned. If you look closely, you can also see one of the purpose-built air raid shelters in Henry Street, just here. Those, of course, were too few and inadequate during the aerial bombings of 1941 in order to prevent major loss of life. Interestingly, it looks as if they are being demolished or perhaps repaired. In this photograph, Gallagher's factory remains unscathed in the background. As did other large buildings further up York Street, such as the Belfast Cooperative Society's premises, seen here in 1942, with much of the opposite side of the street already cleared. And you can see from the building itself, the windows have not yet been replaced after the air raids. And of course, St Anne's Cathedral at its junction with Donegal Street. Again, the bomb shelters built on the site of the former International Bar can be seen in the front of this amazing photograph. One of the most notable employees of the York Street Flax Spinning Company to lose his life during the Second World War was Lieutenant Basil Julian David Brooke, the son of Basil Brooke, 1st Viscount Brookborough and 3rd Prime Minister of Northern Ireland. Lieutenant Brooke, a member of the 6th Battalion, the Grenadier Guards, was killed as the result of an explosion whilst on active service in North Africa at Tunis in May 1943. He was only 22 years of age when he was killed, and he's buried at the Flax War Cemetery south of Tunis. Basil's brother, Lieutenant Henry Allen Brooke, also lost his life in Italy in 1945, aged 21, and he was awarded the Military Cross. So what happened to the company following the destruction of the York Street site? Fortunately, they had another large mill at Muckamore near Antrim, which had been purchased in the early part of the 20th century, and much of the production formerly carried out at York Street was transferred to that site. Back on York Street, the destroyed factory was actually rebuilt on the site of the original buildings. The building you can see here is known to most people as being the former Gallagher Henry Street cigarette factory, but it was in fact built for the York Street Flax Spinning Company in 1947 as a replacement for the buildings destroyed in 1941. It was most likely rebuilt as a requirement of the insurers of the original building and was designed by Samuel Stevenson, the leading architect for mill buildings since the 1850s. He had already designed the nearby Gallagher factory, but this new building did not serve the company for very long. The linen industry in Northern Ireland went into steep decline in the 1950s when Irish linen products went out of fashion, being replaced by much more synthetic fibres such as rayon. Faced with the reduced demand for its products and spiralling costs, in running such a massive factory, the directors of the York Street Flax Spinning Company filed for voluntary liquidation, and the company closed for good in 1961. The following year, the factory was taken over by Gallagher Limited, who had of course been manufacturing tobacco products in the adjacent factory since 1894. At that time, Gallagher took over the York Street premises. The company controlled 35% of the entire UK market. The small streets, such as Sussex Street, that were to be found between the two colossal premises, and which had suffered so much during the Blitz of Belfast in 1941, were gradually demolished, and soon Gallagher occupied the 3 entire blocks from Henry Street to Brom Street. Ironically, as the demand for cigarettes reduced dramatically due to health concerns later, the Gallagher operation on York Street closed in 1988, with the entire site being redeveloped as the York Gate Shopping Centre in 1990. So the next time you take in a movie at the movie house, or go shopping for bargains in B&M at the now renamed Cityside Retail and Entertainment Complex, stop for a moment to consider the history of the site on York Street, which once featured the largest flax spinning mill in the world, and the thousands of people who used to work there and who would have encountered the damage inflicted on the city during the Blitz of Belfast on Easter Tuesday, 1941. I'd like to thank you at this stage for taking the time to listen to today's talk. I hope you enjoyed the content and you will join us soon for the next History Hub Ulster presentation. Thank you.